This is Catholic Forum. I'm Bob Krebs. Dr. Helen Hoffner is a professor at Holy Family University in Philadelphia. Her research on the history of the Rosary led her to co-author The Rosary Collector's Guide, which provides historical information for rosary collectors, antique dealers, and historians. She is also the co-author of Catholic Traditions and Treasures. Her latest book is titled Catholicism Everywhere, From Hail Mary Passes to Cappuccinos, How the Catholic Faith is Infused in Culture. I'd like to welcome to Catholic Forum, Dr. Helen Hoffner. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, and we're going to be talking about your latest book. It really seems like a fascinating topic. Before we get into that, Helen, what did I miss on your introduction? Tell us a little bit more about yourself, if you would, please.
Well, I'm a cradle Catholic, very proud that way. The Rosary book that I started, that was really my first venture into writing for a Catholic audience. And that started because my mother had collected rosaries all her life, and I didn't realize the many variations. You know, like a lot of people, I thought, well, there's red beads and beautiful blue beads, but my mother taught me all the variations, so that got me writing.
Interesting.
And then as I was exploring her rosary collection, it got me to learning more traditions, so that's really where the books came from.
What do you teach at Holy Family?
Well, I'm in the School of Education. So I work with people who want to be reading specialists and work in education. And I'm very happy to see that many of our graduates are out there in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, especially because we're in Philadelphia,
Right.
but in many Catholic schools across the country.
Awesome. That's great. So your new book, traces everyday American culture to its Catholic roots. How did that book come about?
There was a notion, and there was someone who used to be a campus minister here at Holy Family University, used to always say, your work is your prayer. We all get up in the morning and say our morning prayers, but then we have to go out and do our everyday tasks. And we really learned at the university how everything you do can be related to prayer. And she got me thinking. And then it got to be all kinds of fun connections where I saw that just about everything you do during the day has a Catholic root to it, a Catholic connection. So that really got me started.
So I looked through the table of contents, and there is a lot, like you said, there are a lot of things that can trace back to Catholic roots. Just give us a few examples, if you would, please.
Well, if we're thinking about your daily schedule, you get up in the morning, a lot of people have to have their first morning cup of coffee. And the fun fact is, back in the 16th century, when coffee was beginning to make its way through Europe, world leaders wanted coffee to be banned because they said it was addictive, gave people a sudden boost. So they went to the Pope and asked the Pope to ban coffee. And Pope Clement VIII took a sip, enjoyed it, and actually issued an edict that coffee was an acceptable drink for Christians. So say your morning prayers and have your coffee, and you can thank Pope Clement.
That's awesome. Now you mentioned actually in the subtitle of the book, the Hail Mary Pass. Tell us about that, if you would, please. I mean, I've heard the term over and over again all my life in watching football, and I never really thought. Well, of course, I know what a Hail Mary is, but I didn't know how that came about.
Sure, and Roger Staubach, very famous NFL player, he said after the expression got popular that he was playing in a 1975 playoff game, and he just really wanted to do everything he could to help his team win. He was about to throw a pass, and he just said a prayer like, please let me help this team, let me lead the team to a championship, threw the pass, and he said a Hail Mary. So he was praying to Hail Mary when he threw the pass. He said, it could have been a Glory Be pass, it could have been the Our Father pass, but that day I said a Hail Mary.
That's funny. And we all have to thank Roger Staubach for that. I didn't even realize he was Catholic, but I guess so. How about you mentioned the Mayo Clinic? Tell us that story, if you would, please.
And that might be my favorite story in the book, because I think it really shows the work of the Catholic Church. So 1883, actually it was August 21st of 1883, there was a tornado in Rochester, Minnesota. And the mayor of the town at that time was a man named William Mayo. So William Mayo was the mayor of Rochester, Minnesota, but he was also a medical doctor. When the tornado struck, there were all these people who were injured. He needed to take care of them. So he went to look for a big house. Biggest house in town was the convent. And he went to Mother Alfred Mose and asked if he could bring the injured into the convent so he could have them all in one place to treat them. And she agreed, and many of the nuns helped with the nursing care. And when the emergency was over, Mother Mose thought, well, gee, we got through that, but there's absolutely no hospital in town. What will we ever do if there's another emergency? So she went back to Dr. Mayo, who was the mayor of the town, and she said, the Sisters of St. Francis, my order, will put up the money for a hospital if you'll help me recruit the physicians. So we'll buy the money, you help us get doctors, and we're going to start a hospital in this town so that we're prepared for the next emergency. So Dr. Mayo was the first chief of staff, as you will. His two sons were medical doctors. So really all the wonderful work that's come out of the Mayo Clinic all these years later came from nuns in a convent wanting to start a hospital for the town.
And what year was that again?
1883.
Wow. And the Mayo Clinic, if I'm not mistaken, still has some Catholic roots, does it not? Does it still? Tell us about that.
I believe it does. When I was doing my research and looking for things, I found many Catholic organizations supporting it and all kinds of awards that were given by Catholic organizations. So I believe they really have kept their Catholic roots.
Yeah. That's impressive because all around the world, people know the Mayo Clinic as a premier place for healthcare in the whole world. Yeah.
And as I was writing the book, one of the best side parts for me was all the wonderful things that people don't automatically associate with the Catholic Church.
What, like what? Give us a few more examples, if you would, please.
Insulin.
Yeah.
Insulin was actually developed by one of the saints. Insulin is the serious one. Radio. Okay, so we always think about Marconi developing the radio.
Right. And
Marconi did do some early work, but there was actually a priest from my home state of Pennsylvania. And maybe many of the listeners know the Wilkes-Barre area in Pennsylvania.
Sure.
There was a priest named Father Joseph Mergus who liked to tinker with all kinds of things in his rectory basement. He heard about the early work from Marconi, but he had a better idea and thought the system could be better. Actually worked on it, got 17 patents, and he actually broadcast one of the first radio signals from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania to Scranton, Pennsylvania, 19 miles. He contacts Marconi and told Marconi, I've got a better idea than what you proposed. Marconi actually took a trip from Rome to Pennsylvania to meet with Father Mergus, and Father Mergus actually gave him all his patents for free. Because Father Mergus thought, well, he was getting older, he didn't want his radio work to die with him. So we always give credit to Marconi in the history books, but actually Father Mergus was the one who gave Marconi the patents.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting. So if you're listening on the radio to this program, you can thank Father Mergus of Wilkes-Barre, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Helen, what really surprised you about the book? I mean, I would think that doing the research, it seems like that the link to how radio was invented, but are there other things that really kind of shocked you?
The whole contributions of Catholicism. So like the Mayo Clinic, we always know St. Jude's Hospital certainly had a Catholic root to it and still does. But things like Alcoholics Anonymous, that was actually started by a nun.
Wow.
1939, Sister Mary Ignatia started it in Akron, Ohio. She was one of the very first to recognize alcoholism as a medical problem. Where others looked very negatively on people that were dealing with it, she saw it as a medical problem. She's the one who recruited Dr. Robert Smith to work with her and establish the first medical ward for people dealing with alcoholism. And she really started Alcoholics Anonymous.
Interesting. My guest today on Catholic Forum is Dr. Helen Hoffner. She's a professor at Holy Family University in Philadelphia, and her latest book is titled Catholicism Everywhere, From Hail Mary Passes to Cappuccinos, How the Catholic Faith is Infused in Culture. Helen, we all know that Halloween has a basis in Catholicism, being All Hallows Eve. But I was surprised to see that April Fool's Day has a root in our faith. Tell us about that, if you would, please.
Yeah, and that's another one. I think a lot of them are really kind of fun things, aside from the serious hospital ones.
Right.
So we've all heard probably of the Gregorian calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So way back in history, Pope Gregory wanted to change the calendar to make it more aligned with the stars. But way back before Pope Gregory, New Year's Day, the new year began on April 1st. Well, Pope Gregory completely changed the calendar and switched New Year's Day from April 1st to our January 1st. And it was just like nowadays when we make some major change, and there's always going to be somebody out there who doesn't agree.
Right.
And somebody's going to stick to their ways. So even though the Pope and many Catholic countries switched to January 1st, the people who just disagreed insisted on celebrating New Year's Day on April 1st. And they would have all their New Year's celebrations and partying and so forth. Well, people started calling them April Fools because they were making all this noise and raucous party on April 1st when New Year's had been switched to January 1st. So the original April Fools were people who refused to adopt the new calendar.
Yeah. I guess some things never change. People are naturally resistant to change sometimes. You know.
Sure.
Yeah. How about one or two more? We don't want to give them all away because we want people to buy your book, but give us a couple of more that you find particularly interesting.
Well, when we're thinking about the calendar, Benjamin Franklin had an expression about Saint Monday. That way back when people worked on Saturday as a normal work day. So before our current kind of system, Saturday was just considered another work day. Well, a lot of people would sort of celebrate too much and take off, and they wouldn't feel very well on Monday. And in Benjamin Franklin's time, people had a habit of taking what they called a Saint Monday holiday. And Benjamin Franklin said, I work so hard, I don't take any Saint Mondays off. I think the other fun one, since we're talking sort of Ben Franklin, certainly a Philadelphia legend, Father Merkus, who invented radio. I was just telling you about his work with Radio Marconi. Father Merkus also invented the reel that's on fishing rods. So before his time, fishing rods were kind of crude. He got the idea for the patented the spinning reel that fishermen enjoy. He was really a jack of all trades.
And was he a priest of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia back then, or was that another diocese, or do you know?
It would have been in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, which
right.
I'm not sure if that's Diocese of Allentown or Diocese of Scranton, but he was in that area.
Wow, it's amazing. He was a genius. I'm surprised more people don't know about him.
And that's what I loved with my research, making people really appreciate, in addition to being excellent pastors and doing all the spiritual work they should for the people, look at their contributions to science. There was a nun, Sister Kenneth Keller, who was one of the people who developed BASIC, the computer language.
Wow.
So in the 1960s, when very few people had computers on their mind, she was very interested in mathematics. She wanted to attend a program at Dartmouth College, which at the time only accepted men. So it was really unusual for her to apply there as a member of a religious order. But she got permission to attend a summer program there. The professors at Dartmouth were so impressed with her work that she wound up being invited to participate on the team that was developing BASIC. So really, every time we do our online shopping, many of us are using computers right this moment, it's really because of the pioneering work of Sister Kenneth Keller.
Wow. Yeah, that's really amazing, and your book is just full of dozens of stories just like that one. Helen, what has been the reaction from your readers to the book so far? What are people saying to you?
A lot of them are starting to have little trivia games.
Oh, really?
A lot of friends in my parish are taking it with students about Catholic trivia, like what game were priests not allowed to play? For a long time in history, priests were not allowed to play chess because people thought it had ties to demonic ideas. What board game? I'm giving away. So anyone listening today will get the answers right when they play the trivia. The Monopoly board game that we know. Monopoly would not have been a success if the Archdiocese of Boston hadn't encouraged people to work in the Parker Brothers factory. There was a time when Monopoly was doing initially well in 1930. They were doing okay, but then they ran into a problem with their factory, and to really stay in business, they needed to keep their factories open 7 days a week. But Boston was a largely Catholic area where people took very seriously not working on Sundays. The Parker brothers actually went to the Archdiocese of Boston and asked if they would encourage the people to work in the factories and said that they'd be able to sustain their families and bring good income. So they actually issued a letter encouraging people to work on Sundays in a Parker Brothers factory. So we might not be playing Monopoly today without that.
Yeah, interesting. What do you want your readers to take away from the book after they've finished? What do you want them to know?
I want to share what I'm feeling about pride in your Catholic ancestry. Mm-hmm. I think the more I was learning about these people, like Sister Mary Kenneth Keller developed the internet and Father Murchison radio, what I'd like people to know is really, certainly the Catholic Church does many good work that most people know about. But look at the contributions in science, the Vatican Observatory, the internet, the inroads in healthcare, one of the saints developing insulin. I want people to be proud of their Catholic background that way.
Yeah. Yes, some people, especially in the secular world, that they think that the Catholic Church doesn't promote thinking or science, but it's really quite the opposite. In medical field, in education, so many areas. So yeah, it's good. Thanks for spreading the word and helping us to recognize these things. Let's go back and talk just a little bit about your book about rosaries. What should we know about rosaries, Helen? Could we have something valuable in our drawer, at home, of a rosary that may have been passed down from other generations?
We really could be. And people have things like the World War II, there was a soldier's rosary that was all metal. Some people call it a pull chain rosary because it's like the old pull chains you might have on lamps.
Right.
Or sometimes it's called the plumber's rosary because you might have a stopper in the sink. Mm-hmm. Before there was as much separation of church and state as you have now, the government actually gave these to chaplains to give to soldiers. So that's a rosary that if you have one in a house anywhere, they're extremely valuable. Interesting,
yeah. So is your book about the rosaries mostly about American rosaries, or is it about European and other as well?
No, it's really all over the world. In fact, one rosary in there is something that belonged to Henry VIII before his break with the church. Wow. A tenor that he owned as a child. I got a picture from a museum in England.
Wow.
There are many wonderful rosary prayer books available. Our book is more, we joke that it's the Antique Roadshow view of rosaries. What does this crucifix mean? What does this metal mean? What's the value?
Interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating as well. So what are you working on next? What's your next book? Can you give us a sneak preview?
Well, we are working on crosses so that people, basics like what's a Latin cross, what's a Greek cross, but all the variations of crosses in the world. And even there may be some work on that, even non-Christian crosses, like the Zia cross that appears on the flag in New Mexico, that's from Native Americans. So we're doing a lot of research on crosses. We're doing some research on medals. And I joke that there'll be a second volume to this Catholicism Everywhere because I'm getting even more stories about Catholic connections that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of storing them away for maybe another book.
That's great. So how can our listeners get a copy of Catholicism Everywhere and maybe even some of your other books?
If they go to Sophia Institute Press, that's really the quickest way. SophiaInstitute.com is a great way to get the book. Mm-hmm. They are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and other places where you would find books.
Awesome. Very good. Well, Dr. Helen Hofner, thanks so much for being with us today on Catholic Forum, and we wish you all great blessings and success, and you're very close by in Philadelphia. I hope you enjoy the beautiful spring weather.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.